Hi, it's Saturday night. It's uh, February 14th, 2015, Valentine's Day. This is episode 6.6, and called the episode tonight, You Gotta Fight. Okay, that can make you think of different things. Um, the reason I picked this title tonight was because of a quote I was reading, or an excerpt from an address given by Frederick Douglass back in 1857. It was, um, and kind of came across this today because it's the day he chose to celebrate his birthday. I don't know if you're familiar with the history of Frederick Douglass, but he was born a slave, um, and became free, and while he was able to get an education and became a very important popularizer of civil rights. Just an important historical figure, and he didn't know when his birthday was. Part of the when you're born into slavery, not the most accurate birth records. Um, so he chose February 14th as his birthday, and then if he celebrated that the rest of his life. Um, and this is an address from him, and it kind of inspired me to pick the title "You Got to Fight" because it's kind of the message in this speech of his, or this excerpt from this speech. It's just a couple of minutes here, but I'm going to go ahead and read this because it strikes me it's a pretty powerful message. So I definitely think it's worth taking a few minutes to go ahead and read it, and then think about it maybe a little bit. And so I'll go ahead, and I'm not the best reader in the world, so pardon me for that. But here we go. The whole history of progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made are August. The whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions made to her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical. But it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without demand. If it never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Men may not get all they work for in this world, but they must certainly work for all they get. And that was from Frederick Douglass, an address on West India Emancipation, August 4th, 1857. He chose February 14th as his birthday that he celebrated. He was born a slave, but he died a free man, and he has a very, very powerful message here. And I guess I wanted to kind of just maybe quote, reiterate a little bit in here, just because it's important. One line here that really struck me was, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." This is also reminds me of, there's another expression out there, another little quote, pithy little comment. If power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is kind of the same sort of message, is that, people don't, I mean, of course there's exceptions to every rule, but in general, Power concedes nothing without a demand. Um, it's just not, I mean, you can follow what goes on, say in the U.S. Since 9/11. We really felt like George Bush and the Republicans were taking a lot of power and concentrating it in the executive branch. And then after George Bush, Barack Obama was elected, and we thought that might have changed, or at least stopped. No, I mean it's continued. Once power doesn't give stuff back, it just doesn't. It's almost like, why would you? Like it's like the businessman who gives money back. You never give money back to a customer. You give them store credit. You shine them on. You do whatever you. Once you have their money, you don't give the money back. That's what we're in business for. We're in business to get money from them. We're not in the business of giving money back to people. So we don't give money back. And so that's there's just kind of that thing here with power. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Okay, that demand can be you just ask for it, you can petition for it, you can protest for it. You may have to start getting a little physical for it, and that's the history of the world. I'm not really up to date on and extremely well read on this on these subjects, but it strikes me that there's a story of back around 100 BC in Rome. It's a little maybe 70 BC in that area. But as Rome was beginning its transition from republic into empire, one of the early people, I think it was Sulla. So this was before the rise of Julius Caesar, which would have been about 50 years later. He was able to come to power and sort of like as a temporary dictator in some sense, emperor, or just kind of turned off the turned off the switch on the Roman Republic, and he changed a lot of the laws, kind of rewrote some of the constitution they were using, changed the long-term policies. He what he did is when he seized control and took power, he looked at the things that, to his way of thinking, led to the problems that forced him to do what he did. And then he tried to put in changes to prevent those problems from becoming problems again. And he was in power for a couple of years, and he did a lot of horrible things. I mean, let's not mince words there. He basically killed everybody who was against him. But he did kind of what you do when you're in absolute power. But he only did this for a couple of years because his idea was to try and right the ship. It was like he really believed in the Roman Republic. And it's almost like the dictatorship of the proletariat. But he recognized that there had to be, in order to save the Roman Republic, at least this was his thought, is he had to stop it for a while. And he had to become a dictator. And he had to force the changes and kill the people who were against it. And he had to do all these horrible things so that he could then relinquish the power and turn the republic back to the people, and the people being, the people who, the common people, of course. It's the families that ran Rome, the patriarchs, right? So it was so it wasn't like it's turned back to the people, but he put some changes in there, but he used like one example of a person who kind of stunned everybody when he stepped down, because it was like he did his thing and then he stepped down. I mean, he could have stayed in control, and he managed to save the republic for another 50 years, 40 years. Was that good? I don't know. The Roman Republic had gone on for several hundred years, probably 500-600 years. It survived. But its time was coming to an end, and even his taking power the way he did and trying to save it ultimately didn't work. One, it just emboldened somebody like Julius Caesar to come along and take power for themselves again, but this time keep it, because power concedes nothing without demand. And then the other thing is, if you test the people, as it says in here. Find out just what any people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice or wrong which will be imposed upon them. People treat you the way you teach them to treat you. If you don't rise up and protest in the streets, then the government's going to keep taking more and more power, freedom, liberty from you, stealing your privacy, exchanging your liberty for their security. And as long as you submit to it, they continue to do it. And at some point in time, people have to, and people do, have enough. And it gets to a point, and it's happened in every republic, empire, country, really. Ultimately, it comes to a point where the people have had enough, and there is a revolution. Either somebody comes in and just takes over, or there's a revolution from inside, because the people have had enough. Sometimes I think generally it's an improvement after a bloody revolution where hundreds of thousands, millions, or a lot of death, a lot of destruction, several generations of being worse than it was before, but it's worse in a way that it's going to get better. So when you get involved in a revolution, you ultimately aren't doing it to improve your lot in life. You're doing it for future generations. That's just the way it works out. So that's just kind of something that I keep thinking about. But you can resist with words. So he does say here, this continues until they are resisted with either words or blows or both. And certainly words are the first. And words can include things like court cases, or just peaceful protests, even voting. That's really voting with words. I mean, that's rebelling with words. But the system has to be in place to respond to those things. When we have things like free speech zones, and you can only protest out of sight, that's not helpful. When protesters are attacked with mace, when they get just a little bit, I don't mean to say when they get a little bit rowdy, but this is just inconvenient. When you have a permit to protest, and when you go past your allotted time, and then the police come in and forcibly break you up, again, these are not good things to happen. So you can protest with words, and you should protest with words, but you also need to recognize when your words are falling on deaf ears, and you have to be willing to try something different. I'm not saying you should try violent protests. I'm not saying you should try revolution or violence, but you can't keep doing what you were doing before and getting zero results. That we know is not good. We don't do that. We should not do that. And in this other line here, the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. And again, that ties right back to power doesn't give up control. The people who rule over you will push it and push it and push it until you stop them from pushing it. It's a bit of a homeostasis. It's kind of evolution. They're pushing. You want a certain amount of freedom that you're willing to speak up for, and there's a certain amount they want to take from you, and you find that comfortable spot where they kind of agree to, okay, but that's going to be different for every group of people, and ultimately we may have a difference of opinions, and that's kind of where revolution can come in. So it's got to be, but not violent revolutions obviously is the first thing, but the people in power have the most control over whether revolutions are violent or non-violent, right? Because they're the ones in control, they're the ones in power, they're the ones that ultimately have to cede their power. They can do it willingly. They can do it begrudgingly, and they can do it by less desirable means. But ultimately, they're the ones that have to cede the power. You can try and take the power, but ultimately they have to give it up. So that's really the thing that's work to remember, is that the level of intensity of a revolution really is dependent on the people who are in power. They can give up easily. They can give up not so easily. That's going to do it. And then the sort of the closing line here is this. It's this wonderful line here. Men might not get all they work for in this world, but they must certainly work for all they get. So there's this thing here. It's reminding you that you can try hard and fail, and that's okay. because it doesn't really say that's okay here, but it's reminding you that it can happen, and which is another way of saying that's okay. But the other thing that, rest assured, there is no free lunch. They must certainly work for all they get. You want freedom, you got to fight for freedom. Freedom isn't free. Is kind of a cheesy way of saying that, compared to cheesy compared to this. It's a little bumper sticker. You can think the expression freedom isn't free, and then you can come back and then you can read something a little bit more in depth. And again, this is only the tip of the iceberg here. But it contains a lot of important ideas. It contains the ideas that you have to fight for what you get. You got to fight for your right to party. Sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. No, that's not really related to this at all. But sometimes you have to ask for permission. You're not going to get it. People just don't come and give you things. You have to speak up, and in some cases, you have to be willing to fight for it, depending on what it is, and you may have to fight for it. So that was this interesting little. I think with it being Valentine's Day, the birthday of Frederick Douglass, February 14th, I just thought I'd read that a little bit. And, I definitely encourage people to look into Frederick Douglass. Fascinating life, very, very, very important figure in American history. Take the time to, learn about him and a lot of other very, very, well-spoken, brave, just powerful men in the 1800s doing some unbelievable work, and a lot of it, I don't want to say it was undone. It wasn't for nothing, but they were doing it at a time when it was very difficult. This was a speech given. I said, we should say 1847, 1857. This is the Civil War hadn't even happened yet, and this is a black man out there in public doing this kind of thing. So he was definitely very a figure not to be trifled with. And we need kind of leaders like that today to speak up, and not to do the work for us, but to speak up and to give us maybe we shouldn't wait for that person. We should be that person. Be the change you want to see in the world. I encourage all of you to speak up. Don't be afraid to speak truth to power. Don't be afraid to speak to your friends, relatives, acquaintances about the things that are important to you. If they're important to you, they're probably important to somebody else. But first of all, they're important to you. So don't be afraid to speak of the things that are important to you. Like I said, that's one kind of leave it at that. And the other thing, and that was kind of a pretty powerful, deep thing. But also on our page, there was for today is artificial intelligence dangerous? This is kind of a thing that's been kind of talked about, kicked around a little bit, and people are starting to think a little bit more about this. We're thinking more about this because computers are getting faster, more efficient. And what is the future of artificial intelligence? And one thing that is going to happen, I don't think there's any doubt about this, is that when it does start happening, it's going to happen fast. That's just the nature of computers. If we can get through and start getting computers to act a little bit more human-like, they're going to start having human-like. There's going to be human-like thinking. I guess the Turing test is this basically it's a thought experiment. Although the people try and work it out in real, but if you can get a computer to essentially convince you that it's thinking like a person, then what's the difference between it being it pretending to think like a human, or that it's really thinking like a human? I mean, if it fools people, maybe we all do that. I mean, the person that you meet on the street, you think they think like a person. What would be the difference between that and a computer that makes you think they think like a person? There's to kind of let that settle in a little bit. But this is the idea behind the Turing test, and and there's versions of the Turing test. One is like it has to fool 30% of the people, it needs to fool 75% of the people. But the details of it are not as important as sort of the philosophical underpinnings, which are that a machine that you can't tell the difference between it and a person as far as the output and your interaction with it. Imagine talking on a phone or having an internet chat conversation with a text, something like there actually is. There's the who is the chat bot that people use. Oh, I can't remember it now. Cleverbot. Cleverbot. So there's this chat thing on the internet if you haven't seen it, and you type to it. You basically, it could ask it a question. You can just say something to it, and then it responds back to you, and you start feeling like you're having a conversation, or maybe you don't feel like you're having a conversation. Maybe it's just complete nonsense. And really, all it's doing is it's looking. It's using past like a database of like trying to compare input statements with acceptable output statements in a database. Okay, and the idea is the database is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Computers are getting fast enough to serve them up and source them efficiently. But humans, we don't work that way. I mean, that's not the way humans think. We don't think. We don't search necessary databases. Or do we? I don't know. Further perspective is one of these things. Somebody says something to you, and you come up with a knee-jerk response, and that's kind of like a database search in some way. That's like, for this input, this is the way I respond. Boom, boom. That's a database. That's our perspective. But humans have we have processing power underneath. We have this emotional thinking, emotional processing, and we also have this reasonable processing, the thoughtful processing. And generally, in humans, what's happening is your emotional response is the one that's telling you to act in a certain way. It's the one that's kind of boom, 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 do this, do this, do this, do this, react, 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 react. It's a little bit different than the knee-jerk reaction, although it's very closely related. And in fact, at the highest level, the first reaction you could think of as an emotional response. But even if you think about things, sometimes it's that emotional response that says, okay, yes, now's the time to do it. Now's the time to do it. It's an emotional kick there. It's doing that. Where the reasonable one is the one that's holding you back and saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It's the play it safe thinking. That's the reasonable thing, is the part that's telling you to play it safe, and the other one is telling you to take a risk. And when your play it safe equals to take a risk, then we generally pop up with an answer, and that happens beyond the after the perspective, after the knee-jerk reaction, the initial emotional response. That there's this sort of some sort of homeostasis or some sort of where it's balanced. There's another word there that I can't quite think of. Maybe you know the word, but there's this balance point where the risk associated with making a choice is sort of equal to the risk of not doing it. When the risk of doing it equals the risk of not doing it, then you go ahead and you do it. That's like a thing that pulls. Okay, then you do it. And so you listen to, and it reminds me of and I'll end it with this. Is there was this it's been in the news recently, poker playing computer that it plays limit hold'em, so not no limit hold'em. It's only playing limit hold'em, but it's a computer that can essentially outplay any human. The computer always wins, essentially, when it comes down to. But it doesn't win much, and it kind of wins by let's learn to play, like, what's the best move, what's the safest move, actually is a better way to say it. What's the safest move given any hand, any card situation now, and it's learned over time based on running scenarios and simulations and stuff what the safest move is for any card configuration that it sees, and it makes that safest move every time. And so it's always making the safe move. It's always using the thinking part that says, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Always doing the safest thing. Where the emotional thing is the one that says, take the risk, take the risk, take the risk. And the computer doesn't have that built into it. So the computer always wins. It doesn't win much. It grinds it out. It's not trying to win a quick buck. It eventually will be a winner, and they run this computer, and it does win over time. It wins, it wears you out, and will take all your money eventually. But that eventually could mean months or years, decades of playing, because again, it's a computer. It doesn't, time is not an issue with it. Where humans, we have finite resources, we have finite time. We need to make our money now, and we were actually lured by the chance of going all we can't go all in and limit hold them, but and taking that big bet, and betting the maximum maybe when we feel it's like, oh, I feel like I want to take a risk here, where we have this emotional side that's kicking in, and with this artificial intelligence, I think there needs to be the computers need to address that. We can build these chess playing computers, or these poker playing computers, where we sort of master the game, and like Cleverbot, using a lot of just database searching kind of thing, or just kind of doing what is the safe move here. And if you always make the safest move, then yeah, you're always going to, in the long term, you're going to win. But the long term, again, could be much longer than the lifetime of the human who's making the choices. So you don't want to always make the safest choices. Sometimes you have to make dangerous choices. You have to take a risk. You have to be willing to risk something. I think even in that little bit of a speech from Frederick Douglass, there was that sense in there that sometimes you have to take a risk. You got to be willing to fight either with words or otherwise, or both. There's a sense in there of taking a risk, of not just taking what's been given to you. You have to fight for what you. And if fighting is what is that other than taking a risk? The safest thing is not to fight, but it's safe in what sense? You can have all your freedom stripped from you, but are you really living a life at that point? So with this artificial intelligence, we need to kind of work in that. We're kind of starting to simulate more what goes on in the human brain. Like I said, there's these this dual processing going on, competing processes, multi-threaded processing of one side that's trying to keep us from doing the rational area. It's trying to do the safe thing. It's trying to do the rational thing, the reasonable thing. And then you have the risk-taking side, the emotional side, the one that's saying, do it, do it, do it, do it. And then trying to find that balance between the two of those so that you do it when it's when the risk and the reward sort of balance out, and then maybe you do it. Especially with a computer, you can then, if you have this kind of thing, then you can have it play a little bit more risky, and you can have it play less risky. You can actually teeter-totter the way the machine plays, and you can maybe do a little bit of both. I mean, if you have these independent controls, maybe where you have it, it can be really, really safe, but really, really risky, depending on certain conditions where now it's playing erratic. Or you can stabilize it so that it's pretty emotionally stable but risky, or you could have it so that it's overly cautious, so it never does anything, so it like folds every hand, that kind of thing. Or, so you could be tweaking these different things. They have these, but I think of beating the emotional with the thoughtful. It's going to be one thing that happens there. But eventually we're going to get these artificial intelligences. They're going to be generating their own ideas. They're going to be, in a sense, very human. And then if we can't tell them from humans, then what's our responsibility with something like that? These become thought machines, which that's all we are. At the end of the day, I mean, we're alive, and we do value life as humans, as living things. We value life, but even beyond that, we're more than life, right? We're part of the universe, and not every part of the universe is alive. And in fact, certainly when you're dead and gone, whatever happens to your soul, spirit, whatever, that's going to happen to that. But something's going to happen to your atoms, right? The atoms that make up your body are going to go back into the earth, and they're going to find their way back into other people, other living things. I mean, there's estimates are, take a person from ancient history like Caesar, who we mentioned, or Sulla. There could be as many as 1 billion atoms in your body that were in their body. The other thing that you'll hear other people say is, when you inhale, you'll be inhaling some oxygen atoms that were exhaled in the form maybe of carbon dioxide, or it might be the same. You might be inhaling some of the carbon dioxide that was exhaled by Caesar. He exhaled some air, and then you could be breathing in some of that right now. In fact, and then the thing is, not you could be, but you definitely are inhaling some atoms. I mean, you're inhaling, uncountable, not uncountable, but you're inhaling trillions upon trillions of atoms. And in there are some atoms that were at one point in time being exhaled by Caesar. So that's interesting. So everything goes around. Everything goes around, comes around. We're just atoms. We're atoms in the universe that come together momentarily to create a machine that can think. And then those thoughts propagate in the universe. Those thoughts live on in words, in writings. We communicate with other people. Now they start becoming thoughts in their heads. So we become these thought-generating machines, but thought-trading machines, thought-swapping machines. And then we create books and we create databases of thoughts. Now we have these computers, and we're getting to the point where they can start creating their own thoughts. Now, I don't know. That's kind of weird to me. It's interesting, and it does it outside of being alive. In the sense of humans are alive, but we could get these things where they could be doing their own. They could be self-replicating. They could build mining. You could build robots that do mining, and they could mine for natural resources. So that you could do more construction, build more robots. They could build rockets. They could launch those rockets with robots in them. The robots could go to other places, and then you have these thought generating machines that can continue on. And then are they alive? No, they're certainly not alive, but they are the universe generating thoughts and acting on those thoughts. That's what we do as being alive. This is one way the universe has to sort of understand itself and to propagate and generate thoughts, and we've raised this level of consciousness. So who's to say these machines wouldn't rise to the level of consciousness? Because what does that even mean? We don't even really know what that means. I mean, I have the sense of identity of who I am. I have the sense that I'm conscious and aware. But am I just do I have to fool other people into believing that? I mean, other people say they are. When I look at other people, I believe they're conscious and aware in much the same way I am. But am I just being fooled? Is this the Turing test? Am I, that once I accept that they are, that it doesn't really matter? Because that's the Turing test. Is that it's irrelevant. Once you pass the Turing test, it's irrelevant whether or not you really are alive or not. It's just a matter of convincing other people that you're a thoughtful, conscious being. I don't know, interesting stuff. But I'll leave it there. So that's Random Access, Random Thoughts with Random Access. Tonight was Saturday night, Valentine's Day, 2015. Do quick Twitter update. You can hit us up with a hashtag RTWRE, that's Random Thoughts with Random Access. Also tweet at us at Random Access. You can see the Facebook page, that was Random Thoughts with Random Access on Facebook. You can see us on YouTube, Google+, and then you can also catch us on the feedback line, which is 15189666175. That's 15189666175. Good in the U.S. and Canada. If you can make U.S. and Canada calls, that's a U.S. and Canada number. 3 to 4 during the week, 3 to 5 on the weekends, 11 to midnight after the show. And for the Twitter followers update, lowest number ever, 9. Or since we started doing the show, we're finishing up every night for 49 nights I've been here doing this, and this is the lowest number yet, 948. It was 951 yesterday. So going down, 948. I will talk to you tomorrow, Sunday night. Good night, be safe, play safe, as they say on Valentine's Day, and have fun. Bye-bye.